FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is April 12th, 2017. It's Wednesday, hump day, and you probably look around, you're noticing changes happen, particularly this retail apocalypse. I mean, Sears Roebuck, once the most prolific, successful retailer on the planet. I mean, people used to sit around their mailbox waiting for the Sears catalog to come. It's on the edge of insolvency, and on and on and on. Every day, new retailers going out of business. And it's not enough to just say that the internet is doing this. No, there's a generational shift that is taking place that many of you probably haven't noticed. And the millennials, who are going to make up the bulk of the population in this country one day in the not too distant future, God help us all, they are largely responsible for this. And our good friend Charles Hugh Smith has hit the nail on the head as usual. And Charles, hey, great to have you back. Been too long, and congrats on your new book, The Inequality and the Collapse of Privilege. So welcome back, Charles.
Thank you, Kerry. And it's my pleasure to join you yet again and to talk about the millennial generation. Now, I should say I'm a baby boomer in my early 60s, but, you know, a lot of my friends are younger and they have millennial kids. And so I feel like most of us know millennials, and we can observe the generation at work and at play directly. And so it's something that we may know individuals, but we can kind of extrapolate that behavior into, you know, multiply it by 78 million, and then we get a sense of the financial and economic changes that are occurring as the millennials grow older. And, you know, one of them is, of course, student loan debt, right? Millennials were all told, you know, you got to get a college degree. And so what if it costs $40,000 or $50,000 a year? You got to do it. And so many of them have burdensome student loans, and the education they received really wasn't that useful. Yeah. And so they, as a course, they're not interested in acquiring even more debt. You know, they're already indebted. So there is some evidence that they're tending to be savers. You know, they save more, and they're not interested in a debt based consumption. So that's one change. Exactly. I think you hit the nail. I mean, they're not conspicuous consumers like our generation was. They seem to be, I don't know if it's a lower aspiration level or just the realization maybe hit them that doesn't matter how much stuff you have. If you're miserable inside, none of it's going to matter. Is that what it is? Yeah, that's part of it, I think, and that they're more attuned. There was just an article in the Atlantic magazine online that was talking about the retail apocalypse, and of course they mentioned the online sales, and like half of U.S. households are Amazon Prime members, so you get free delivery. But the millennials are also, the Atlantic was claiming with some evidence, I think, that the millennials are more interested in an experience. You know, in other words, they'd rather meet friends downtown at a brew pub than go out and buy a bunch more clothing. And so they showed a chart where retail sales are, you know, slowing, but restaurant consumption, you know, retail, going out to eat is still strong. So, and I think we can see this in the this movement, which a lot of us see in a variety of cities and towns, not just the really big cities, where the millennials are preferring urban experience. They prefer to live downtown where they don't have to own a car and have a car payment, and they have easier access to their friends. Mm-hmm. And you before we started recording, you mentioned that you'd seen this in places that have been sort of depressed for decades, like Buffalo. Yeah, in Buffalo, it's big. It's happening. There's a lot of colleges in Buffalo, Charles. The University of Buffalo, Buffalo State, and a bunch of other ones.
And basically everyone couldn't wait to move the heck out of the place. That's all they wanted in life, was to get out of Buffalo. And now it's all changed. They're moving downtown. Buffalo's got fairly decent transportation. They have a streetcar. They might have shut that down, I'm not sure. Buses, and really the place has totally turned around. There's a real estate boom going on there. It's remarkable what's happened there, and I've seen it firsthand. And I think I didn't realize it at the time, but it really was largely as a result of what you were saying here, of a change. It's a mega trend, I guess you would call it. It's a long-term trend, and the millennials don't wear suits to work, for the most part. If they are working, right, they're not wearing suits. They're wearing khakis and polo shirts. That's the dress code. So that's affected real estate and retail quite a bit, because those men's clothing stores like you and I grew up going to in our early careers are kind of falling by the wayside. So the trend is really there. There's no denying it. Right.
And so there's a guy that's written a couple of books about the urban the positive elements of an urban metro core. His name is Richard Florida, and his basic premise is that cities and urban areas are where the jobs are, and that attracts the talent and the capital, the money, the investment money. And so this is, of course, a magnet for young people who are starting their careers. And so I think Richard Florida was mostly talking about major urban cores, kind of like New York City, Miami, LA, Phoenix, these kinds of places. But I'm seeing this, what you're describing in Buffalo, I'm seeing it in smaller towns like Columbus, Ohio, which of course is also a college town, Bend, Oregon. There's these places are becoming really fun, even for non-millennials, to visit and to hang out. And so I think we're seeing this re-urbanization of even small towns. If, as you pointed out about Buffalo, if they have decent transportation, or maybe they're on a river, or they're sited well, and they have some potential job basis, but even if the job market's poor, the movement we're describing is creating jobs, because somebody opens a brew pub, then they hire a couple of friends, and then somebody else opens a cafe next door if they succeed, and it builds on itself. And so the big impact here is, what is this going to do to suburbia? Because suburbia was the result of the post-war generation, the GIs coming home and going to college, and then everybody, the baby boom parents were buying houses in new subdivisions and leaving the city, right? So the urban centers were decaying through the 60s and 70s. So who's going to buy all those suburban homes, which are, more recently, at least the ones built in the last 20 years, are often expansive. They're 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet. And who's going to buy all the stuff that used to go in those homes? The tons of furniture, the backyard furniture, the pool equipment, all of that stuff is probably going to recede. And I'm not sure that the suburban home values can be maintained where they are now if there's no buyers.
That's a good question. Well, is it just a trend that'll go back? The reason why my parents moved out to the suburbs was for the school, the quality of life, they weren't like city people, and, they grew up in suburbs. So is this a permanent trend, or is it just a phase that you go through when you're younger?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I think part of the answer might be the millennials' view of car ownership and commuting. And so that, of course, the success of suburbia generated its own problems, right? In other words, now that tens of millions of people moved out of the city as far as, 30, 40, 50 miles, well, then the jobs are still in the city, the urban core. And so there's these long killing commutes, right? And we all know how it is, or we've either lived it or we know friends friends who live it, and people are still driving as far as, an hour, 90 minutes each way. And so that's a killer. That destroys your life. So, and if you're not in love with driving to begin with, then it may very well be that the millennials are making the sacrifices, like just being renters instead of owning a flat, downtown, or they're making the sacrifices to buy a place, a small house in the urban core to just avoid the commuter hell that goes with suburbia now.
Yeah, well, it's hell, all right. No question about that. The commute. But on the other hand, so many of you are like really working out of your homes now, and it's a lot different. The commute. I mean, you work out of your house, I work out of mine. The only time I have to commute is when I have to go see somebody for some reason or other, and really, it's like no big deal.
Yeah, it's true. And, Kerry, that's an excellent point, because I just came across a chart and we're shifting from commercial real estate in terms of retail to office space, right? Like office complexes and office parks. I saw a chart where employers are starting to really cut the number of square feet per employee, right? Because people are, as you say, they're telecommuting, they're working at home, they're teleconferencing, flex work, and so all of these economic changes in the way we work, and the millennials are in the forefront of this because they are more flexible in terms of what they're used to doing, and working remotely and digitally is natural to them. Then you have to wonder, do we need so much office space? And a lot of commuting is to get to work, to sit in a cubicle, and then, well, hey, if you can do half the work at home, then why should so many millions of people commute to an office park? So it's clear to me that employers are starting to rethink this and starting to shed the amount of square footage they're paying for, for their employees. And so we might even look at the whole suburban thing and include office parks. So like we're seeing a decline in retail, and especially suburban malls. We're seeing a potential, move away from office parks, which are usually in suburbia as well. And then we're seeing higher costs downtown, right, in the urban zones, and so which is pushing lower income people out into the suburbs. And so if all these trends continue, as you say, we don't know, it's a little early yet, then we're going to see a different composition of suburbs and a revitalization of the whole urban core, and it will become too expensive for a lot of people, or they won't be willing to make the trade-offs, and so then the suburbs will be the cheaper place to live, which would be a kind of turnaround from 20 years ago.
Well, interestingly enough, the trends in society, the highest or rapidly growing poverty centers now are actually in the suburbs, not in the urban cores any longer. So that's something that's changed as well, where people are moving to get away from poverty to the suburbs. Now you've got suburbs that have turned into poverty zones. So you want to get away from them, right?
Right. And and we can look at the cost of living in the suburb when gasoline was really cheap and cars were relatively cheap. Then it was really no big deal to afford that lifestyle with a couple cars. Every adult in the household needed their own vehicle because you've got to drive everywhere. But now that cars cost a cheap just a conventional car is $30,000, and a pickup truck with a few options is 35 or 40. I mean, it's a major chunk of money now to own a car, and insurance costs are high, and then gasoline is quote unquote cheap, but still, so it starts making living in a downtown area where you can use public transport or Uber and ditch that those hundreds and hundreds of bucks that you're paying for owning a car. You can spend that money on other stuff. So it is appealing in that regard. So if the suburban lifestyle starts becoming cumbersome and expensive, then it becomes less appealing because millennials don't make as much money as the boomers did at the same age, right? We all know millennials are making less money. They have less financial security. They have more student loans. And so, of course, they're going to be averse to adding more debt and buying some big house with a big mortgage. That's just not, that doesn't work for most millennials.
Nope, not at all. And that's there's so much different than our generation here, Charles. It's remarkable. They don't see the future as being bright and having all of these potential great things. They're just really kind of just trying to make it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so you know, what do? You ditch the buying the big sofa on time. You ditch the car and the car payment. You downsize, and it over time, I think we're going to look at something that other people call degrowth. This is what they call it in Europe, right? Yeah. Because Europe and Japan have the same situation, that the millennials are often, working in precarious employment for lower pay. And so this degrowth means less growth, less debt-based consumption, and less building of large suburban homes, and all those engines of growth that basically drove American GDP higher for like 40 years. Those are reversing. And so we're going to have to find either other sources of growth, or we're not going to have growth. We're just going to have stagnation.
Right.
And we'll have to adjust to that.
Yes, we will. I'm not quite sure what the adjustment's going to look like. The country's going to look different here. No question about it. I mean, it's been looking different for quite a while, but it's really going to be different once this transformation takes place.
Right.
So,
and so in terms of investment, obviously, if you can find a town center or a city center that's on the way up, and young people are moving in and creating businesses, that might be the place to buy or to get into before it becomes sky high like Brooklyn or Toronto or the other super hot markets. So no wonder people are moving to places like Buffalo. It's affordable, and
exactly.
That's the key. You got to find a place you can afford to live.
Yeah, affordability becomes key. And then also low tax states and low tax jurisdictions as opposed to high tax jurisdictions. That's why the South has boomed so much, not just the great climate, but because generally the red states, less of them have income taxes, more of them are lower tax states, and you can't downplay the role that taxes play into it. In fact, you could argue that all of it kind of comes down to government and taxation causing this trend.
Yeah, you're right, Kerry. That's a huge influence. Is the government imposing such high costs on the citizens that they can no longer afford to consume?
Yeah.
And you have to look at places like Illinois and California, where people are paying $15,000 to $20,000 a year in property tax.
Oh God.
How can a millennial look at that and go, is this really worth living in one of those really high cost areas? And the answer would be no if you have an alternative. And we have to kind of make mention of what causes economic a dynamic economic environment. Well, low cost, right?
Yeah.
In other words, it has to be low cost. It has to be affordable, because if everyone's just barely scraping by and paying most of their income to debt service, there's no money left over to do anything to spark growth. And so you're absolutely right. It comes down to affordability. And so cities and counties that make an effort to be affordable, they're the ones who are going to attract the millennials and the growth. And cities that just keep raising their taxes and reducing services are going to see like a massive migration out of their jurisdiction, and we're already seeing that in Illinois, right? And to California, I think, as well.
Yes, for sure. So these trends, there has to be employment opportunities, got to be a growth zone, right? A growth area and a low cost area. And if it's a low tax area, that's even better. Then you're going to see, in all likelihood, these millennials will acquire wealth. And then what are they going to do with it, Charles? Once they've done, they paid the student loans down, or maybe the loans will get discharged for fraud or whatever. I mean, you've been seeing those things come up, predatory lending and making loans to these kids who you should have never loaned 10 cents to them, let alone $100,000. And yet they're shoveling it out the door with two hands. So once they get past that debt stage there, they start saving up wealth. Are they going to buy houses? What are they going to do once they've gotten out from behind the eight ball?
Well, Kerry, it's an excellent question. And the millennials, the older millennials I know, in other words, the millennials in their late 20s, early 30s that are starting to, get married and have kids, they're definitely buying houses, but they're scrimping and saving to buy a house in an urban zone, like downsizing, buying a two-bedroom bungalow that's in the city core rather than buying a larger suburban home. And so that seems to be the trend I'm seeing. It. That's just anecdotal. I don't have any statistics about that, but that's something I'm looking at, is that I see people in their 20s, early 30s scrimping and saving, maybe borrowing from their parents or getting some help from the family to buy an expensive small house in an urban area like Portland or Seattle, that's got jobs and is desirable. So that seems to be the trend. Make the sacrifice and get the house inside of an urban zone, and avoid suburbia.
Yeah, and it makes convenience-wise, there's a lot of positives for it. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see whether the millennials really are, in fact, different, Charles, or whether they're going to come back to the post-World War II values that you and I grew up on.
Right. It's and another interesting trend I see that some millennials, and it's a minority, I think, they're interested in homesteading. They're going out and buying old farms and stuff like this. And this is also global. I see reports of this in Japan and Europe, where young people are sick of making chump change salaries in the city, which it's super expensive. They'll never get ahead. So then they go out to a rural area and they can rent a house for like $300 or $400, or they can buy land for a tenth of the cost of an urban house, and they're going for it. And that's exciting too, because rural America has basically been in decline for decades as everybody went to the city, and so there's a lot of cheap land and cheap housing, and if people are willing to work at it and form a community where they can help each other, there's some growth potential there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Hey, we're going to have to leave it at that. Charles, again, your new book, just haven't had a chance to talk to you about it. Inequality and the Collapse of Privilege. It's got a compelling title, I'll say that.
Well, it's what I hope for, the collapse of privilege, because it's in our way. It's not helping us, right, as a society. So yeah, and come visit me at of2minds.com. Okay,
and we'll have a link, as always, in the show notes to this interview. You got any questions, comments about this show or any others we do? Send me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com. The Twitter feed is @KerryLutz, and the Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. Who would have thunk? Anyway, Charles, we'll talk to you again real soon. It's great catching up with you.
Thank you, Kerry. It's been my pleasure.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
That's affected real estate and retail quite a bit, because those men's clothing stores like you and I grew up going to in our early careers are kind of falling by the wayside. So the trend is really there. There's no denying it.
Right. And so there's a guy that's written a couple of books about the urban the positive elements of an urban metro core. His name is Richard Florida, and his basic premise is that cities and urban areas are where the jobs are, and that attracts the talent and the capital, the money, the investment money. And so this is, of course, a magnet for young people who are starting their careers. And so I think Richard Florida was mostly talking about major urban cores, kind of like New York City, Miami, LA, Phoenix, these kinds of places. But I'm seeing this, what you're describing in Buffalo, I'm seeing it in smaller towns like Columbus, Ohio, which of course is also a college town, Bend, Oregon. There's these places are becoming really fun, even for non-millennials, to visit and to hang out. And so I think we're seeing this re-urbanization of even small towns. If, as you pointed out about Buffalo, if they have decent transportation, or maybe they're on a river, or they're sited well, and they have some potential job basis, but even if the job market's poor, the thing the movement we're describing is creating jobs, because somebody opens a brew pub, then they hire a couple of friends, and then somebody else opens a cafe next door if they succeed, and it builds on itself. And so the big impact here is, what is this going to do to suburbia? Because suburbia was the result of the post-war generation, the GIs coming home and going to college, and then everybody, the baby boom parents were buying houses in new subdivisions and leaving the city, right? So the urban centers were decaying through the 60s and 70s. So who's going to buy all those suburban homes, which are, more recently, at least the ones built in the last 20 years, are often expansive. They're 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet. And who's going to buy all the stuff that used to go in those homes? The tons of furniture, the backyard furniture, the pool equipment, all of that stuff is probably going to recede. And I'm not sure that the suburban home values can be maintained where they are now if there's no buyers.
That's a good question. Well, is it just a trend that'll go back? The reason why my parents moved out to the suburbs was for the school, the quality of life, they weren't like city people, and, they grew up in suburbs. So is this a permanent trend, or is it just a phase that you go through when you're younger?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I think part of the answer might be the millennials' view of car ownership and commuting. And so that, of course, the success of suburbia generated its own problems, right? In other words, now that tens of millions of people moved out of the city as far as, 30, 40, 50 miles, well, then the jobs are still in the city, the urban core. And so there's these long killing commutes, right? And we all know how it is, or we've either lived it or we know friends who live it, and people are still driving as far as, an hour directly. And so it's something that we may know individuals, but we can kind of extrapolate that behavior into, multiply it by 78 million, and then we get a sense of the financial and economic changes that are occurring as the millennials grow older. And one of them is, of course, student loan debt, right? Millennials were all told, you got to get a college degree, and so what if it costs $40,000 or $50,000 a year? You got to do it. And so many of them have burdensome student loans, and the education they received really wasn't that useful. And so they, of course, they're not interested in acquiring even more debt. They're already indebted. So there is some evidence that they're tending to be savers. They save more, and they're not interested in a debt based consumption. So that's one change.
Exactly. I think you hit the nail. I mean, they're not conspicuous consumers like our generation was. They seem to be, I don't know if it's a lower aspiration level or just the realization maybe hit them that doesn't matter how much stuff you have. If you're miserable inside, none of it's going to matter. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's part of it, I think, and that they're more attuned. There was just an article in the Atlantic magazine online that was talking about the retail apocalypse, and of course they mentioned the online sales, and like half of U.S. households are Amazon Prime members, so you get free delivery. But the millennials are also, the Atlantic was claiming with some evidence, I think, that the millennials are more interested in an experience. In other words, they'd rather meet friends downtown at a brew pub than go out and buy a
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is April 12th, 2017. It's Wednesday, hump day, and you probably look around, you're noticing changes happen, particularly this retail apocalypse. I mean, Sears Roebuck, once the most prolific, successful retailer on the planet. I mean, people used to sit around their mailbox waiting for the Sears catalog to come. It's on the edge of insolvency, and on and on and on. Every day, new retailers going out of business. And it's not enough to just say that the internet is doing this. No, there's a generational shift that is taking place that many of you probably haven't noticed. And the millennials, who are going to make up the bulk of the population in this country one day in the not too distant future, God help us all, they are largely responsible for this. And our good friend Charles Hugh Smith has hit the nail on the head as usual. And Charles, hey, great to have you back. Been too long, and congrats on your new book, The Inequality and the Collapse of Privilege. So welcome back, Charles.
Thank you, Kerry. And it's my pleasure to join you yet again and to talk about the millennial generation. Now, I should say I'm a baby boomer in my early 60s, but, you know, a lot of my friends are younger and they have millennial kids. And so I feel like most of us know millennials, and we can observe the generation at work and at play, a bunch more clothing. And so they showed a chart where retail sales are, slowing, but restaurant consumption, retail, going out to eat is still strong. So, and I think we can see this in the this movement, which a lot of us see in a variety of cities and towns, not just the really big cities, where the millennials are preferring urban experience. They prefer to live downtown where they don't have to own a car and have a car payment, and they have easier access to their friends. Mm-hmm. And you before we started recording, you mentioned that you'd seen this in places that have been sort of depressed for decades, like Buffalo.
Yeah, in Buffalo, it's big. It's happening. There's a lot of colleges in Buffalo, Charles. The University of Buffalo, Buffalo State, and a bunch of other ones. And basically, everyone couldn't wait to move the heck out of the place. That's all they wanted in life, was to get out of Buffalo. And now it's all changed. They're moving downtown. Buffalo's got fairly decent transportation. They have a streetcar. They might have shut that down. I'm not sure. Buses, and really the place has totally turned around. There's a real estate boom going on there. It's remarkable what's happened there, and I've seen it firsthand. And I think I didn't realize it at the time, but it really was largely as a result of what you were saying here, of a change. It's a mega trend, I guess you would call it. It's a long-term trend, and the millennials don't wear suits to work, for the most part. If they are working, right, they're not wearing suits. They're wearing khakis and polo shirts. That's the dress code. So